I'm Driti Shah, and this is my podcast, Have You Thought About? I'm a writer who loves to find out about what passions people are pursuing, especially if they're managing to blend them together in unusual ways. In each edition, I'm chatting with someone I find particularly interesting and who's managed to fit things together in their life or profession that you might not think of as an obvious match. Here, I'm talking to Sarah Brouner, the award-winning founder of SB Tutoring UK. Sarah works with students across a wide range of ages and abilities, including neurodivergent learners and those in alternative educational settings. She's been recognised multiple times for her work, including Professional Tutor of the Year and SEND Tutor of the Year, and is passionate about inclusion, curiosity, creating space for every learner to thrive. Now, Sarah, this is a massive blast from the past because we were actually at school together a long time
We
ago.
were.
It's been over 20 years since we had a face-to-face. So what has been going on?
Quite a lot happens in 20 years, Judy. An awful lot has happened. First of all, that I've had sort of two very separate careers. When I graduated with a sports science degree, but I really, really wanted to go into the science side of that, into the physiology, and I become a clinical physiologist in private healthcare. I found the love of my life at university. We've got married, we've had 2 kids, and that was the catalyst, really, the children coming along to change my career. I think, like many women, becoming a mother changes you, and actually the old life that you had just doesn't work anymore in terms of routine and fitting. It was a big career. I went up into senior management in healthcare and working ridiculous number of hours every week, and it just didn't fit with small children. So I used that, like I said, as a catalyst to change my career. I knew I wanted to carry on using my science knowledge, and within that role also was lots of training of new clinical staff. So I put the 2 things I wanted to do together and decided to become a tutor, a science and maths tutor, and use my skills to pass that on. Probably rather naively thought, I'll just do a couple of hours a week, it'll be fine. And then actually quickly fell in love with that. And I feel now that career as a business owner and a tutor, especially working with my SEN students, my neurodivergent students, is more where I'm meant to be. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be a scientist. I don't know. I've just found that I've kind of loved that career more, and it fits me, what I want to achieve out of life and what I want to spend probably the rest of my working life doing.
You're a tutor, but you're also an award-winning tutor. So, there is that element of there is high caliber with what you're offering. And again, I also remember you being super sporty back in the day. So bringing all of that together, you're clearly going for not an easy paths, also expecting quite a lot out of yourself, out of perhaps the people that you're tutoring. How does that work? How do you navigate those spaces?
Well, I think, thank you, Gigi. I think a lot of people assume that tutoring is just sort of coming in to help with homework or support homework, maybe through exams and that kind of thing. But as I've been doing tutoring almost 11 years now, and actually my very first student was a special educational needs student who was severely dyslexic, and it affected in many aspects of his life. And the more students I've seen with SEN, the more I've kind of navigated towards those kind of students as well. I've just found it sort of clicks, probably based on my own personality and quirks and my own families as well. We have diagnosed and probably undiagnosed people in the house. I just find that the industry experience I've had, maybe as working in hospitals, maybe working in like as a scientist, that I've brought it all together. And actually in between those 2 big careers, I actually worked for a charity with disabled children. I used to run on weekends, I guess a little bit of respite care. I used to kind of run like a play, I call it play group because it went up to age 12 and that feels really young to call it that. But it was somewhere where children between the ages of 4 and 12 could come and play different games with us. And we would also teach them different life skills and experiences. So I know I can draw upon all these things that I've done and help the students that I typically see in the daytime would be home educated students. It's called elective home education, but I would argue it's almost like a forced elective home education in that they've really tried to go to school, but they've reached a barrier, they've reached a block. And even just trying to get into the school building has become so anxiety inducing that they've become very unwell and had to kind of stay at home. As a parent myself, you don't want to see your child in that sort of level of distress. And the option that they had was to remove them from that environment, remove them from the school and educate them at home. And then they might bring in a tutor such as myself. And I try and bring, like I say, as many skills as possible, not just teaching, whatever it may be in science and maths, but we'll do lots of hands-on experiments and in different environments as well, Druti. So if we can be outside, we'll be outside. If we can use different tactile things to teach, why not? So I have a particular student who likes chalk, to write in chalk. I had a student who was a really, really, almost to a point, obsessed with glass and writing on glass. So I've brought along a lipstick, a fresh lipstick that they can write in glass, because then we can clean it off again. It's not a problem. And all of these kind of things you can do when they're at home. There's no like, oh no, we don't, you can't write on the windows, because I can't imagine a school would allow their students to go a bit nuts on a window. Got so much freedom, if you like. I still work within the UK national curriculum, but they have so much freedom to explore lots of different things. And quite often with my autistic learners, they'll have a particular focus of the time. And so we'll run with that. We'll go with whatever they currently are really curious about and want to know, really deep dive into that topic or that subject. And I'll just go, yeah, why not? I can always bring science into everything, because science is everything. So it's wonderful to be able to do that.
It's really interesting that you do that, because there are often spaces where you don't get that bespoke learning, where it's like those with special educational needs, those who are neurodivergent. It's, here is the way that you're going to be taught, even though people have different styles of learning, even though they have different ways of approaching things. Here's the SEN space. Here is space for you. So for you, being able to have that more bespoke style with the tutoring, how did you, I guess, come up with that plan, or how did you figure it out? Were you figuring it out as you went along with each student, or?
Yeah, and I think it has to be for those students, actually for every student. And I think tutoring is different to teaching in that it's very reactive to students' needs. You can plan for a whole academic year, and I've done that before. Right, this week we do this, then we progress on to this, and you quickly throw the plan out the window. You realise as a tutor that's not going to work. Essentially, that's what schools do, because they have to cover so much volume of the curriculum in a time. They can't get to the end of year 9 and go, well, we only did half of it. They're really Ofsted are going to come in and have something to say about that. But with individuals, or I run small groups as well, then you have the space to lengthen that out. And you must be reactive to the learner, because if I just speed through at the pace I would like to do and say, right, you're going to sit your exam in a year, what's the point? They won't be ready. So you have to go at the pace that student is in. And I guess like kind of figure it out, like say, as you go. I've got so many years down the line and so much experience now that I know very quickly from 1 or 2 sessions with a student how the pace is going to go and how they like to learn, and what I can then start to bring to the table. And even within that, I have students with very good weeks and very bad weeks with, so I'm thinking of particular students with PDA, pathological demand avoidance. Have you heard of that? I'm not an expert on it, but I've worked with a lot of students with this condition called pathological demand avoidance, which I don't like the term. It sounds awful, but it sits under the autistic spectrum. So it's not to say that people who are autistic have PDA, it's just maybe part of that spectrum. Some autistic people do have it. And I think the best way I can describe it is that if there's a demand placed on that person, they will instantly go no. And they might not verbalise no, but it's a freeze response. So I think many people have heard of fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. I think we can add freeze onto that. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And these particular people, because it can be adults, not just children, of course, go into freeze. And that demand could be something as simple as brush your teeth, please, or you've got to go and get dressed now. Oh, we're going to do this now. And so it's very difficult. If you think about the number of demands on you every single day, and they will go into this unconscious kind of place where it's not a conscious choice, all right? They're not being defiant. I want to make that really clear. This isn't a badly behaved child. This is part of the autistic spectrum where their brain will just freeze and go, I can't, no, I just can't do it. I was talking about learners at school, particularly with PDA learners. They struggle so much, the number of demands just to get to school. And then once you're in school, And then the sensory environment around those demands as well. And the transitions that you have, right? You have this lesson, then this lesson, then this lesson. So much. And so they end up coming out of school and seeing someone like myself. But with them, they're going to have good and bad days, good and bad weeks. I've had students who literally cannot even come downstairs and have arrived and they can't. We've had to abandon ship that day. We've had to say, right, it's not going to work today. And so you have to modify your tutoring. So I know when to pull away, put the brakes on, if you like. And I think, okay, well, we'll do a soft lesson. We'll do a soft maths lesson. Let's do some games. And I've always got the boot of my car duty is overflowing with games, materials for experiments, all sorts of things. Or there'll be something in the kitchen that I know that we can put together and do something with. But it's interesting. So every day looks really different. You can't really plan. You can have a rough plan. This is where we're going with your maths or your science, but you need that flexibility as a tutor, and you need that reactiveness to them, not your own agenda. It just doesn't work.
And I mean, that's the other thing. You're shaping a lot of confidence. It's not just about the numbers, for example, in maths or the maths is clearly more than numbers, or this is how the molecules are. It's about ensuring that people are getting set up for life. The kids, are getting set up for life. So bearing that in mind, like that's quite a lot.
It's a lot to take on.
Yeah. It is. How do you navigate that?
I think confidence in any subject, in anything, is key, because when you feel like you can fail and there's no consequence to that failure, and I'm, that your educator, or if I'm educating, is not going to be disappointed in you or is going to raise their voice at you or anything like that, then they can finally start to take the leap. It's all about creating a really safe psychological environment for that child. It is safe to try, it is safe to make as many mistakes. And one thing that you need in abundance as a tutor is patience. You need an awful lot of patience, especially with SEN students. And that's okay. It's fine. I say that's okay if we've done this and we've got to go back over. Some students say to me, I'm so sorry. Can we do that topic again? I know we've done it 6 times. And I say, you don't have to apologise, because the more you see it, the better you are at it, the better you will become at it. So for me, it's creating a safe space. It's getting to know that learner. I always think tutoring is more conversational tone, like what we're doing now, tutor, we're having a conversation. And that's how I would walk in and treat my students. I typically work with those who are 11 to 18. But, I have very complex SEN learners as well, who may be adults, they're 18, 19, but they're working at kind of age 5 level, age 6. So it's no point me tailoring it to an adult and seeing that person as the adult, because they're working at a lower level. And again, so we can take the pressure down, make it more of a conversation. We can play some games, and then we can do, I guess more of your traditional sort of learning if I bring in some worksheets or something like that to take notes. But you're absolutely right. Confidence is key. And I think underpinning that is this safety to fail. It's okay to fail, make mistakes or whatever it may be, go through it 100 times. There is absolutely no consequence with me by doing that. Good tutors know it takes time, repetition over and over again, and you make it a safe space for them to learn.
And I'm just going to pick up on that in terms of there's actually quite a lot of debate in the education circles and spheres about whether you need to have these formal teaching qualifications in order to be a great tutor. And you're bringing a lot of lived experience and real world industry knowledge, right, with what you're doing. So can we explore that a little bit more in terms of, were you having concerns about some of the history that you were bringing, that you weren't going through a particular path that perhaps others were, or how does that work?
I get drawn into debate quite a lot about this. I think it's something that the tutoring community talk a lot about, and we're seeing more and more teachers leave the profession as well. And I'm seeing them coming to tutoring. The number of ex-teachers I'm linked with or friends with on LinkedIn tell me about their experiences. And I think actually on both sides, teachers and tutors, I don't want sides, of course. We know that there are great tutors without teaching qualifications, and we know there are people with teaching qualifications who aren't great tutors. It's different skills. And I've always said, I just don't think I could go into a school and teach. I don't think I could have a class of 30 and manage that and get through the content and all the admin. I imagine the admin is very much like healthcare admin. There's an awful lot of admin behind it and regulations that you need to stick to. And people are coming in to watch you as well. You're audited by the CQC, which is like Ofsted equivalent. So I know all that pressure. I've been under that pressure. And I don't have a teaching qualification, come from that industry background, and I think that brings a wealth of knowledge in itself. Alongside that, I was an invited lecturer for 9 years, actually, at Kingston University. And so I know I can teach, but I don't have that bit of paper. But it's interesting. It's an interesting debate that people have. But I think there's a lot to be said for coming from industry. And equally, I seem to remember in the UK, we had a sort of government push at some point many years ago, but I don't know if you remember this, Judy, where they were trying to entice people into teaching from other industries and saying, your skills are brilliant. We'd love to have your skills to become a teacher. And I don't see why it can't work that way. They were kind of encouraging people to go into teaching, albeit get their qualification. But I think it's valuable. I think not just science, obviously any kind of experience of whether you're a historian or, you've been in the clergy or wherever your background may be, or scientists like myself. So, yeah, I think it's valuable to have people from all backgrounds, really.
Interesting you just said that you're a scientist. So in terms of the identities that you're hosting and juggling right now, what are they?
I guess I still say I'm a scientist, not practicing scientist, I guess. I teach science, tutor science. For a long time, I used to say former scientist, former physiologist. And someone very close to me pointed out, but you haven't lost that. You're not necessarily practicing it, but you haven't lost the fact that you was a scientist. So I do identify as that. But I think many of us have multiple identities, Druti. I think many of us do. I mean, you're a journalist, you're an author, you're a writer, you're a storyteller, you're multi-award winning, you're a woman. We have many identities. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a tutor, a scientist. And I think it all just adds to the person. We're never one thing, I think. Identity is multifaceted. I never think we're one thing.
One of the other things that I think is really interesting about you, you did talk about the different careers before. You're now the tutoring, you are a scientist, but you are also a businesswoman, an entrepreneur. That is not easy. You work solo, right? So how are you following that path, especially as women founders? There's not a lot of money invested in them. It's harder to be on that path. It shouldn't be, but it is. So how are you figuring that out? And also, having to have conversations about money, that's awkward. How to make sure that people know who you are, being a one-woman band, as it were. Like, how are you doing that?
It's interesting because actually at the time of recording, I am going to one of the largest, if not the largest, tutoring conferences this week and delivering a presentation about business. Actually, I'm going to talk about trademarking businesses and why that's important for very small businesses and independent tutors. It's not easy. And I've described myself in that talk, and sometimes I do, again, another identity, Druti, as an involuntary business person. Because when I set out to be a tutor, I hadn't even given that a thought. In fact, I started with agencies and then I started my own business about a year and a half after. I'll be honest, mostly because I was like, I don't like them taking the cut. I could set up and do that. So my business is around 8.5 years old now. And although it's still just me, I haven't hired tutors on board because there are rather complicated legal compliances that you have to abide by and different models. I've decided to remain just me, but it's grown in other ways. It's grown in the services I offer, and it's grown in the hours that I provide and the network of people that I know and work with. So it grows in other ways. Running a business is hard. And I think there's this fallacy that you hear a lot about passive income and, I'm a tutor and I work 9 hours a week and that's it. And I own a 6-figure business. It's all rubbish. If you really want a business to work, you have to put in the hours. And I'm a strong believer through experience that you can't just sit around waiting for work to come to you. You have to create that. You have to drive that. And I know you're the same, Judy, because I see a lot of your posts on social media and so on. You have to become visible. I think that's the hardest thing I've done as a business person, is become more visible and put myself out there on social media, because with that comes vulnerability, maybe criticism, and not everybody agrees with my views, especially on home education that we've touched upon. So yeah, running the business is more difficult. I've never been a person that's had a problem talking about money. I think that's really important, that we should all be more open with money. And actually, one of the things I do with my students is, that's kind of a bit off curriculum, that I should be on the curriculum, is kind of learning more about finance. And I know you wrote your book about that, which is really good. But I think it's so important and crucial that students understand how to budget, what credit is, what debit is, how to manage their money effectively. And certainly when I'm working with my special educational needs students, there can be an added layer of vulnerability for them if their math skills aren't strong. How will they know if they're being ripped off at the shop? What do the numbers on their little Go Henry cards mean if they've got one of these little Go Henry pocket money type cards? With every single student, I go through kind of the key aspects of finance, depending on what's age appropriate for them at the time, because I've never had a problem with kind of discussing money. I think people should be more open about it, to be honest. Being quite messy, I do like managing my bookkeeping, my spreadsheets. So again, I've enjoyed that. The tax can be rather complicated, but it's like anything else. You can learn it. And, I work with learners, and I think that you, as an adult, should also be continuously learning. So I've had to learn this stuff as I go. And sometimes, due to I've made mistakes and I haven't got it right. But you have to then just kind of, you just learn it. Yeah.
Have you ever had that awkward moment, though, when you know what you're offering, you know your services, clearly you have a lot of experience here, but people still potentially undervalue you? They're like, oh, all you're doing is just telling people how to do things. It's fine. It's How do you deal in those circumstances? Or have you been quite lucky and quite had to deal with those conversations?
I think, no, there's always a mix. There's always a mix, to be honest. And yeah, tutors are expensive, and I'm at the expensive end. So of what I offer. I think London probably has more expensive tutors. That's just London. It's in its own bubble. But I am at the expensive end. I think early on, I probably undervalued myself. I probably didn't charge enough. And I was worried about getting enough people in. And like, if I, put it higher up, no one will pay that. So there is that. I think that's learning in business, definitely. And actually, I had a bit of advice when I was an undergraduate. I took another course at a different university to become a sports therapist. So I did it in summer, did like a summer course. And the guy who was teaching us said that when he put his prices up, he had more customers because people perceive you as better quality, whether you are or not. I try not to convince people now. I don't like being salesy or pushy. I think there's a lot of information on my website. I think testimonials from other parents or references count for a lot, because that's where a lot of my work comes from, actually, word of mouth. People talk to other people, and parents certainly talk to other parents about what's recommended. If people don't think I do much or think I'm too expensive, then I'm not the right tutor for them. I'm not the right tutor for them. A student, the right clients will come along, and they'll see the value I add. One of the things that I've won a couple of awards for my business as well. Humble brag.
Brag away. I say brag away. We should celebrate. Yeah. At the end of the day, if we don't celebrate ourselves and we don't sponsor ourselves, who else is going to do it?
So I've won, obviously, for in my business, positive impact on people, but I've won 2 awards for customer service excellence, because that's the one thing I've always been good at, is making my customers feel seen, or clients, whatever you want to call them, students, because the parents are my customers ultimately, making them feel that I care. I obviously do care, but I'm very responsive to inquiries. I'm very responsive to what they ask. If I